Hey everybody, welcome to your week 5 phys ed lecture. Welcome to my living room. This is in my house. I'd obviously much rather be in person with all of you, but this is where we're at right now. So go grab yourself your coffee or whatever little beverage you like to have, and we are going to spend a wee bit of time together over the next little bit to talk all about recovery this week. So my name is Kara Mazarol. I've been at RMC for like 15 plus years now, and I'm also the 2 Squadron PE rep for any new faces that may not recognize me. All right. So basically, let's do a quick review of what you've done the last 5 weeks. Essentially, week 1 was all about goal setting. This is super important because really that kind of is paving your path, your blueprint moving forward. And I know for my squadron, people did an amazing job. So examples that people put for like long-term goals, obviously buying a house, having a family, and being healthy, that kind of stuff, which is super important because that all comes down to the why really that we're doing all of this and why your physical fitness is so important. So if that why is strong enough, then we'll always be able to fall back on that. So awesome job on the goal setting. Week 2 is all about choosing a training program based on your individual goals. So you had some choice there to either choose a program that we provided for you, or you can work on your own. And this is what will be really amazing going through this lecture is you'll be able to reflect on what you're currently doing because many of you are choosing to do your own programming. So hopefully this lecture will help you out with that. Then we did movement fundamentals, and this is so important because in terms of recovery and our performance, having great movement efficiency is really going to be the foundation to ensuring you're meeting all those goals. And then last week with Thomas, you did conditioning, and again, basic understanding of aerobic versus anaerobic is again going to create that really great path for you to not only achieve your performance goals, but ensure that we have sufficient recovery. All right. So basically the why we're doing all of this is it still comes back to your operational readiness. So in case you've never seen this before, this is a calf balance strategy. And really it all comes down to your physical performance. It really is balancing many different things such as injury prevention, your performance nutrition, physical activity, and of course your sleep and rest. All right. So that's the why. It always comes down to that operational readiness for everyone, as well as your long-term sustainable health, which is really key. Okay. So first thing we're going to do is actually a little introduction here. So like many topics in the fitness industry, recovery really operates on a spectrum. So we could spend an entire course really talking about the specifics of movement and breathing, and again, diving deeper into the energy systems. But our whole goal here today is essentially just to give you some basic principles that you can add to your everyday life to credit your system. So essentially, we can plan ahead so we don't feel broken or tired and that we don't end up in a recovery debt. So how can we constantly credit that system daily? So we're quickly going to do a little knowledge check here. So basically, where are you at right now in terms of understanding what recovery is? So all you're going to do is answer yes or no. Do you think that these modes are recovery? All right. So here's the first one. So this is a picture I pulled from last year's bike-a-thon. So think of actually the opposite, okay? And when you do your bike-a-thon, you have like zero tension and you're going like 120 RPM. So think the opposite. The parameters are on your left there. So think instead the tension is extremely high, all right? Cadence is very low and it focuses on a concentric muscle contraction. So if you did a training session, say for 20 minutes on the bike, high tension, cadence low, would that be considered recovery? Yes or no? Okay. Example number 2, yoga, spending 45 to 60 minutes of yoga. Is that recovery? Yes or no? This is 3 Squadron during FIOP this year. Their FIOP staff led them through that yoga session. They did a great job. Next example, let's look at our men's hockey team. Say they were on the ice and they chose to do some tempo intervals. Okay, during those tempo intervals, if you skated at 70% intensity, if your work was at 10 to 12 seconds, and then you recovered for 60 seconds, would that be considered a recovery? Doing that about 10 to 20 reps. Yes or no? Okay, what about running? This is Logan Roots. You may recognize this familiar face. If we ran at 70% for about 45 to 60 minutes. Would that be considered a recovery session? Yes or no? What if you just sat on the ground, legs up the wall in this pose for say 2 to 10 minutes? Would this be considered recovery? Yes or no? What about meditation? This is last year's exam decompression December. Our health promotion specialist Sharon Ash led, I think most of those girls are from CMR, led them through an IRA session. What about meditation? Yes or no for recovery? What do you think? And then the last one I have here is a Turkish get-up. And the reason I chose this is because I know some people in 2 Squadron are actually doing a Bobby Maximus programming. So say you did Turkish get-ups, the weight was 15 to 25 pounds, and you did 100 reps. You had 30 minutes to complete this. Would that be considered a recovery session? Yes or no? Alrighty. So reflect on that, and we'll come back to those in a little while. Okay, so basically our learning objectives for today is hopefully at the end of this session, you're going to be able to explain what recovery is in terms of your physical training, and then how to apply those principles to your weekly training. So we kind of going to get some boring stuff out of the way here, but so important. So let's talk about some basic definitions so that we're all on the same page. Basically, what does recovery mean? Recovery is a return to normal state of mind, health, and strength. And it's basically a term to describe the adaptations to workload after an athlete has been exposed to training or competition. All right. Then we have regeneration, which is basically the recovery process. All right. Then we have adaptation, and that's the body's ability to adjust to increase or decrease physical demands. And then we have this training term or principle. It's called overtraining, which really, with new research that we're doing with physical training now, we're starting to understand that really very few people actually overtrain, especially with your age group, and that instead people are really into under recovery or into that recovery debt. All right, so you'll be able to understand a little bit more about that as we move forward. So instead of overtraining, really can you add more things so that you're recovering properly? All right. So one important principle is specific adaptation to impose demand. So Todd Hargrove explains this best when I was kind of looking through some different explanations. So when the body is placed under some form of stress, it starts to make adaptations that will allow the body to get better at withstanding that specific form of stress in the future. All right. So why is this important? A lot of people will give an example here of your 2.4 kilometer run. As I was looking through training logs, many people have just a 2.4K run like 2 or 3 times per week. So it's really important to understand that we still need to constantly put stress on the body. And for your PPT within your week, having a variety of intensity and volume is going to form different types of stress. You can actually have that adaptation take place. So when you're looking at your training week, if all you're doing is 2.4K runs, you really need to kind of have a look and reflect on this presentation and the conditioning presentation last week and see how really, if your goal really is to enhance your performance and improve your time, we really need to have that variety in your training. Alrighty. So it's also, we'll use this term for today. This is a really well-known definition that's from 1990, but anytime you kind of go and look at recovery, or if we go to different seminars, this is always what comes up. All right, so we're going to think of recovery as the following. Okay, the first concerns monitoring the athlete's adaptation to training and stress so that appropriate recovery strategies can be determined. All right, so an example of that, of monitoring in your week 1 assignment goal setting, you did your resting heart rate in the morning. So resting heart rate is a really great way to monitor your adaptation to your training program. And the second relates to the selection of specific recovery techniques and strategies to minimize any fatigue from training and competing. Okay, so that's what we're going to kind of get into today, is what are some specific recovery techniques that you can really get into. All right. So it's also really important to remember that recovery is multidimensional. And you have to kind of sit back and think, are there other areas in your life that you need to focus also on improving? So while we're going to focus on the physical aspect today, it's really important to remember that there's still many other factors, such as emotional, cognitive, and social things that are happening around you, those stressors outside of your life besides a physical activity, that are really overall going to affect your ability to adapt and recover. Let's get some recovery myths out of the way. So first one, rest days are for the weak. The harder I train, the more fit I will be. I think Thomas covered this as well last week. So we really want to focus on doing the right things. Training harder doesn't mean better. What can you do that is going to be the best for you? If I recover, I will stop my progress. Well, this is just simply not true, and actually the opposite. So if you can fit in specific recovery, or we'll see later rebound days, which Joel Jamieson uses, that you'll actually help elicit those adaptation responses much quicker. A total day off is the best way to recover. This is pretty much known as a passive way to recover, all right? Definitely passive recovery is a way of recovery, but there's much more to it, and hopefully we can get that across in this presentation, that you can do more active methods that just aren't going to a yoga class or stretching on a recovery day. All right. So basic principles. So this is what we're going to apply today and how you can apply it to your weekly programming. Basic principles for recovery are individual variability. All right. Driving the parasympathetic nervous system. Focus on movements that use a concentric muscle contraction. And while we're not talking about it today, nutrition, sleep, and hydration are the fuel that keeps us running. So no matter how amazing your recovery program is going to be, if you're not eating and sleeping and hydrating properly, this is not going to pull you out of that hole. So we'll cover the nutrition and sleep in the weeks to come. All right. So let's look at that first basic principle, individual variability. What does that mean? Simply, it's not a one size fits all, but the principles remain the same. For example, intensity. Let's look at that example we use with Logan. All right. We're looking at a trained individual versus untrained individual. So the person on the right may be a few of us after this COVID, all right? We've eaten a little bit too much, spent a little bit too much time watching TV. So the individual variability when it comes to overall training principles is really key. Logan is a runner, which means his movement efficiency of running is really high. And based on his 2.4K run times, he has an extremely high VO2 max, so his ability to use oxygen. So he has a great aerobic engine, all right? If we compare that to another officer cadet or Navy cadet who may be 30 pounds overweight, runs a 2.4K in 14 minutes, has sore knees, runs with a limp, you have to really think, would going for a 45-minute run be the best means for recovery session? What if that officer cadet cycled for 45 minutes? Or what if in high school, he or she was actually a competitive swimmer? That means that the movement efficiency for swimming is really high. Perhaps he could swim for 45 minutes. But the important thing is to remember that the principle of the intensity is going to remain the same. So thinking that 60-70% intensity, all right? But the mode can change, whether it's running or cycling or walking or swimming, all right? The principle is that you're going to feed the parasympathetic nervous system. So what is the parasympathetic nervous system? Basically, our body responds to stress in different ways. So if you look on the left, it shows the sympathetic nervous system, and this is the system that is your fight or flight, all right? Heart beats fast, your breathing is fast and shallow, all right? If we look at the parasympathetic nervous system, this is your relaxation response. This is what calms you down. It's your rest and restore. All right, so the heart beats slower, it's a nice pattern, and your breath is full and slow. Okay, so why is this important? Well, this is important because this is our main means to our recovery. And what feeds the parasympathetic nervous system are things like your breathing and movement, all right? Everything we do in a day requires energy. And breathing is the most repetitive movement you do throughout the day. All right, so let's just have a quick look at this slide. Respiration drives mobility, movement, and recovery. That's a quote from Joel Jamieson. At the end of the day, our entire body responds to the way we breathe, and that includes how muscles contract and relax. So improving your breathing, getting that 360 diaphragmatic breath, can directly impact your movement quality. And why is movement quality important? because poor movement efficiency drives energy demand up, which drives the sympathetic nervous system. So it drives that stress response instead of the relaxation response. So you can see all the pictures above. Those are basically the examples I gave at the beginning, which really focus on ways that you can improve your breathing efficiency, all right, which is going to help that parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, breathing is so important, but we take it for granted because we just do it, obviously, every day to live, all right? So next important thing to kind of feed that parasympathetic nervous system is actually that movement efficiency. What does that mean, all right? So including multi-joint exercises into your programming, ensuring a balance between those week 3 concepts of your squat, hinge, upper push, pull, and loaded carries, all right? Because this is important, having an unbalanced muscular system will lead to compensations, which leads to more energy demands, all right? So at the end of the day, if you don't move well, it's gonna suck the energy out of you during your workouts. You're not gonna have as high of a performance, and we're not gonna be able to feed into that parasympathetic nervous system, all right? You're constantly gonna be fighting with that sympathetic nervous system just to get your training done, all right? So super important. So then it comes down, great, Kara, so actually tell me what to do. How do I train the parasympathetic nervous system? How can we get this in here? So let's look at this. This is great because you already learned this. You learned it last week during conditioning. The aerobic conditioning system feeds that parasympathetic nervous system. So basically you can use any cardiac output modalities or those tempo interval modalities that were talked about last week. I put a couple other examples here. So under cardiac output, that 45 to 60 minute cycling, running, hiking with that target heart rate 130, 150 is going to feed that parasympathetic nervous system. You could do different types of circuits like run 10 minutes, row 10 minutes, all right? Or you can do those tempo intervals like the hockey example, all right? Or I put another example here if you like rowing for 20 minutes. On each minute, pull hard 5 strokes, then easy for the remainder. So that gives you that 10 seconds work, so that 50 rest. So those are great ideas of how you can include still training on a recovery day, which is feeding that parasympathetic nervous system. This is an active recovery day. So if you don't totally understand or can't reflect back on the difference between that aerobic and anaerobic, this is the slide from last week. So if you're still not really grasping the concepts of that, I would suggest maybe going back and reviewing Thomas's lecture on the energy systems, all right? Okay, so the next concept of our principles of training is using a concentric contraction for your exercise selection. So let's just talk about really quickly about the different contractions. So if I'm doing a bicep curl, right, this is a concentric contraction, the muscles are shortening. If I straighten, extend my elbow, that would be the eccentric contraction. Most muscle soreness is going to come from that eccentric contraction. That's when the muscles are lengthening. So if we do concentric focus exercises during our training program, so the shortening phase, then basically you can still elicit a training effect without the muscle soreness if your movement efficiency is bang on. So essentially you're going to avoid being sore on those recovery days. Let's look at some examples. Okay, so typically when you're using this method, it's full body exercises, you're using a heavier load and it's 2 to 3 sets. So say you were using a barbell and you could do a deadlift. Basically you're just pulling from the floor, so you're in that full hip extension phase at the hips, and then you just drop the bar. All right, so you just take away that lowering portion, which is that eccentric phase. Okay, with the sleds and prowlers, you can do a variety of sled pushes, or what's really great is you attach a TRX, because having slack allows you that variety. So for example, I have the sled, my hands are on the TRX, I give it a pull, and then I step back, pull, step back. All right, so that would be an example there. Most medicine ball explosive work is an example of concentric training. Also with the barbell, you could also do different clean variations and catching in a high position. All right. And then the cycling example at the beginning we had there from the spinathon, that is an example of a concentric workout. Okay. Because basically each movement is that concentric contraction. You're pushing down. There's no actual pulling and recovery phase. It's push, 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 concentric, concentric. All right. So that is an example of a recovery training session, focusing on that concentric contraction. So that the next day, you're not going to be sore, but you're still feeling like you had that workout and you did have a workout. Okay. So what's next? What is your action plan? How are you going to include those principles into your weekly training? So basically, you're going to have some self-reflection. You're going to make a plan. How can you credit the system? You can credit the system by adding breathing and mobility into your exercises daily, and then checking for some non-adaptive responses, like checking your resting heart rate once in a while before you get out of bed. So let's look at self-reflection. So let's be honest with ourselves. This is really important. Think about last week. Remember, everything requires energy. So you really need to think about what is taking me into an energy debt. How much did I drink? Did I party with friends? Right? How many all-nighters did I spend gaming, or did I not get that assignment done? Or do we get into that Netflix drowning session into a series where you just watch TV for 10 hours? Smoking, what is your nutrition? And then, of course, we're talking about here, what is your exercise program? Are you moving well? Do you have a good selection of exercises? All right. So have a little bit of self-reflection. What is pulling your energy? And then think about, okay, how am I going to credit it back? Okay. So this is super important because we can add things into our daily lives and not even realize it. Next week, we're going to talk about nutrition, and the week after, sleep. For today, we're focusing on the breathing, movement, aerobic portion. And then you also have to recognize your dimensions of wellness. So that's like your occupation, environmental, spirituality, that kind of stuff. All right. All those things impact how we're going to recover. So think about what is stealing your energy, and then really think about how you can credit that system back each day. Next is you're going to make a plan. All right. So basically, we use what's called the FIT principle. This has been around for years. This is nothing new. So when you're looking at making a training program, it's frequency, intensity, time, and type. All right. So look at your weekly schedule. Have some time management. What assignments are due? Look at your entire week. Chores or whatever you need to do around the house. Really be honest with yourself. How many workouts you can do in your week? What are your goals? And then where can you fit the recovery or rebound days? This is an example from Joel Jamieson here, and I'm going to put this on Moodle, this article, so you can read it. This is one example. He likes to use the phrase rebound as his recovery days, which are specific workouts that we just talked about that are actually going to still continue to elicit those adaptation responses. All right. So you keep moving forward with your performance, avoiding that fatigue. So if you look at this, you can look at an example. Stimulation is basically a moderate volume. So that's the blue. The red are those development days where that's the intensity is really quite high. So perhaps that's when you're going to be doing those anaerobic type training sessions. And then the green is that rebound type day. And those are workouts that are going to focus on that parasympathetic nervous system. All right. So look at your exercise selection throughout the week. Are you getting the key movements in? How are you moving? Are they primarily multi-joint? What is your total volume? And what is your total aerobic versus anaerobic sessions in your week? Because that's really going to either complement or hinder your ability for that recovery process. And of course, your overall performance. All right, so let's look at an example. This is Joel Jamieson. This is taken right from his website. All right. And again, I will give you access to this in our Moodle for some extra resources. And I love this example because it's really specific to what we're talking about, as well as your training for the PPT. Okay. So this is an example of a rebound recovery day workout. This is an active recovery day, starting off with breathing. Then you're going to do tempo intervals. All right. Doing 3 different modalities. Once you've done the tempo intervals, you're doing a classic lower body pull, your hinge movement, with some upper body. So you're doing deadlifts. But remember those deadlifts, you're dropping the weight from the top. Okay. You can see there that the volume is not high, but you're still lifting at 80 to 90%. All right. So the goal here is you're still going to elicit those training responses, but you're not going to be sore the next day. Okay. Then you're going to do a recovery cool down on the bike. All right. And then you're again focusing on feeding that parasympathetic nervous system, getting down to the breathing and purposeful stretching and foam rolling. So that's an example of how you can use lifting in that training session for your recovery day. Let's look at another example, which is specific to running. So this is right from our website. This is Kevin's 13-week running program. So you see it's a little bit different, but if you look at the Wednesday and Friday workout, those are essentially your active recovery days. You can see you're running at an easy pace, all right? And then you're doing some of that tempo training with the strides, all right? Then back to the easy pace of running. So where's the Thursday workout there? Well, Thursday in this program is an off day, but think about where your energy debts are coming from. Maybe that Thursday, if you choose this training program, maybe you can try some meditation or other forms of passive recovery. Alrighty? What is taking your energy? Think about that. How can you keep crediting the system? So basically it comes down to what can we do every day to really help ourselves? Add breathing, add a warm up, and a purposeful cool down. All right. So these are all the resources for you. You're already training, hopefully, at least 3 to 5 times a week, getting ready to come back. So adding a breathing exercise to your warm up is a great way to just credit your system daily. All right. So this is on Moodle. You can watch the videos. There's 5 different examples of breathing exercises there. Choose one, give it a try, add it to your daily programming. Okay, let's talk about the Supple 7. All right, I put this together at the start of FIOP because I know, look, people do not like to warm up. I know this. All right, it's not sexy, it's not fun, but it's so important. So the Supple 7 is basically just a series of exercises. It takes less than 5 minutes to do, and it works on basic ankle mobility, hip mobility, thoracic and shoulder mobility, and our reflexive core stability. All right. So make your warm-up purposeful, incorporating all those different exercises, which is going to make your movement efficiency better. All right. Which means your energy demand is not going to be so high when you're training. Okay. Next is Recovery 5. This is a new one we just put together. So it's the same concepts. No one ever likes to cool down. So let's cool down with something purposeful that is going to credit the system with breathing and movement that's going to feed that parasympathetic nervous system. So again, just add some recovery in there. All right. Last thing we're going to talk about is what has been known or is known as an overtraining principle, but kind of thinking about it more as under recovery. All right. So do you need to change something? So if you notice a sudden drop in your body weight, if your heart rate is elevated more than 6 to 8 beats comparatively to your regular morning heart rate, if you're not sleeping well, if you're constantly feeling tired, these are all signs that you're potentially not adapting well to your training program. So something needs to change. All right. So basically, you can just, the best way to do that is, keep an eye on your resting heart rate. That is a really good and proven method to show how you're adapting to your training. Do that in the morning before you get out of bed. All right. So awesome job. You stuck with me through this whole time. Think back to the very beginning of this lecture. Would you change any of your answers from that knowledge check after reviewing what we've just reviewed? So all those examples would be, yes, they're all recovery sessions because it includes individuality and specificity to their sport and or fitness. So whether trained or untrained, all of them feed into that parasympathetic nervous system through either active or passive methods, that aerobic system, or working on breathing, mobility, stability. And exercises are multi-joint and concentric focused in nature to minimize your delayed onset of muscle soreness and fatigue. Those are just those basic principles. All right. So basically, what do you need to do now in terms of your knowledge checks? You need to do the quiz. So why not just do that right now? Get it out of the way. It's fresh in your head. So bang that out. And then this week, you'll just submit your regular training log. But really take some time to reflect this week on that training log. What did you put as your week 4 assignment? Your conditioning sessions. How can you incorporate those conditioning? Because I'm assuming hopefully you put conditioning stuff that you like to do. How can you maybe add those training sessions you did into this week's training log or your workouts? All right. So do the quiz, do your training log, but when you're doing that training log, really think about all these concepts in your week of training. Okay. How can you credit your system daily? Frequency, intensity, time, and type with that aerobic, anaerobic, and of course your strength conditioning exercises. And then do some regular check-ins to actually how you're feeling. All right, there's sleep quality, and really overall, are you feeling great? Are you ready to attack the day? Or are you constantly having days where I'm like, man, I'm so tired. All right, so that pretty much concludes your week 5 on recovery. Next week, you're gonna be hitting some nutrition with Tyson. I really wish you all the best, and I can't wait to see everyone in person live again, and we can actually apply these principles in real life. So have a wicked day. If you've been sitting in front of that computer all day, now is a perfect time after you do the quiz to go out and do something you really like to do and some physical activity. High five. You guys rock. Super happy to still be part of this team. Cheers.